Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Well, enough to talk about with Dr. Robert A. Heineman, Alfred University Political Science Emeritus, to last, the next half hour or close to it. How you doing, Doc?
Thanks. I'm doing fine. Thanks for working me in this morning, Brian. Yes.
Okay, starting out with the demise of Jeffrey Epstein. I believe it was you who said that his stay was not going to be all that long.
I've certainly said that to a number of people. There was no way in my mind that he was going to get out of that jail alive. Again, looking at, we still have to have more information in terms of how he died and things of that sort. But when you're talking about deep state politics, Epstein and the people he's working with, I mean, you're talking serious relationships and power dynamics there that, before this is over, if, in fact, the FBI and the Justice Department does a thorough investigation, which is called for, there are going to be a lot of people very nervous and, I think, named. And we're looking at a recent article, I think, in the Times Literary Supplement on Epstein. I mean, the guy names, I forget how many people that took the trip out to, what was that island again there? Pedophile Island or something?
I think that was the name of it.
Clinton's name is on that manifest, I think, 20 times, 16 or 20 times. And quite a number of other people. What's his name? Prince Andrew, I believe.
Yes, there's a number of pictures of Prince Andrew.
Although, again, I think he was a time or two, so I don't know, how deeply.
The girls have named him.
Yes, I guess that's right. Yeah. So, I guess the one point is the guy wants to run sex orgies and such. I guess that's his business and these guys that are involved. But when you're dealing with minors...
Yeah, do they have to be 8, 9, 10th grade?
Yeah, come on. That begins to get... That's serious. And it's criminal. My view is I'm deeply skeptical of the fact of the claims that the man committed suicide and the idea of that somehow conspiracy theorists are way out on this one. Now, this is a conspiracy. I think this is an actual conspiracy. And what's interesting, and I think our listeners can keep track of this themselves, is how often and to what extent the major media mentions this. If you look, for example, on the CNN webpage last day or so, there's almost no mention of Epstein. Clearly, I think there's a lot of pressure, not only in terms of legal action, but in terms of press releases and things of that sort. However, I think we can count on a few of the reporters out there to start digging deeper and deeper. I mean, this has far-reaching ramifications. Although, again, I think the people in power will do everything they can to smother it.
It's one bizarre thing after another, really.
Yep. Well, Epstein himself was pretty bizarre. One of the people, I guess, that he had involved was Stephen Hawking. Now, Hawking, of course, his ability to engage in much physical activity was, to put it mildly, but Epstein apparently had this real infatuation with scientists and scientific ideas and things, and so there's a number of top scientists that are involved in addition to a lot of other pretty important people.
Dr. Bob, it seems that U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren is drawing pretty big crowds, and
yes.
Former Vice President Joe Biden's having a number of gaffes. He's always done that, but when you combine that factor in with Elizabeth Warren's crowds, what do you make of that?
Well, I think she's beginning to get some traction. How far that goes, we'll have to see. Apparently she's put a lot of time and effort and money into Iowa, and the latest polls show she's up 10% or more in the Iowa caucuses. Now, how that plays out in the caucuses, we'll have to see, but that's a pretty good margin right now. Again, that's what? How many months would that be? 4 or 5 months out yet. And she's drawing big crowds in New Hampshire. Now, you would expect, I guess, for her to draw pretty good-sized crowds in New Hampshire. She's from Massachusetts to start with, so you get people coming across the border to give her some volume in her audiences there and things. But the point is, you go from Iowa to New Hampshire, you begin to build a little momentum, that's for sure. The real problem would be then South Carolina, where, although I believe South Carolina and Nevada are on the same day, are pretty close. And she'd probably do pretty well in Nevada. There's a little something beginning to build now. Now I see Stacey Abrams, the lady from Georgia, who was defeated in a close race for governor, claiming, of course, that the polls are
it was stolen.
Yeah, the votes were taken. Yeah, well, but she's decided that she doesn't want to run for president, but she would be honored to be a vice presidential candidate. Now, you want to think on that a little bit. For her to be, and Biden, I think, has approached her as a possible vice president nominee. But again, if Biden's the nominee, whoever's the VP is going to be pretty important. And I don't know if people are going to be too enthusiastic about Stacey Abrams being a heartbeat or half a heartbeat away from the presidency. On the other hand, if Elizabeth Warren's the nominee, she and Stacey Abrams, that would be kind of a strange combination too. So at any rate, it's just kind of interesting. Watch these people maneuver here and there.
Other odds and ends, John Hickenlooper dropped out of the race on Thursday afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Well,
what was he, former Colorado governor?
I thought he was Iowa, but or one of those others.
Yeah, he's not terribly relevant.
I think something that is relevant, Brian. You'd want to talk about something relevant for a minute here?
Bernie Sanders?
No, I want to talk about the New York State Senate, Brian.
Oh, okay. Let's hopscotch over to state politics.
Yes.
They've lost another Republican who's running for state Senate. Running for another office, and that leaves the Republicans one less Republican in the state Senate, and they don't own it now anymore anyway.
Yes. So we were saying that it'll take 9. You can pick up 9 seats there to win back a majority, and then we said, of course, if Jacobs challenges Collins in Buffalo, which I think he's going to do, that Jacobs seat will be open, and I can't believe that somebody is going to let Akshar skate through without some serious opposition. And now you have the man this guy's from Syracuse, I believe, is giving up his state Senate seat as a Republican to run for Supreme Court position. So that gets it up to 12 seats there that are going to have to be held on to by the Republican, gained or held on to. And I think in the latest case, the fact that this guy is a Republican state senator, but's got a shot at running for a state Supreme Court is not a good sign, again, for the Republican minority in the state Senate. The guy clearly, I think, has seen the writing on the wall and has decided, hey, here's another opportunity. I think I'm piling out of here. So I think Mr. Langworthy has himself a real challenge there, and I believe he'll be speaking tonight in Mount Morris at the Livingston County annual August big fundraising event. So the folks that want to hear and meet with Mr. Langworthy, this is their chance to see what his strategy is. I think he'll be giving an upbeat talk and trying to get the troops rallied.
As long as we're on New York State topics, can we talk quickly about that law that went into effect? The
What law is that?
The Victims Act that went into effect on Wednesday?
Yeah, Cuomo's been signing laws into effect rapidly here. I don't know. He may still have some more on his desk. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Senator Young was not in favor of that. She felt that it would... It could, I think what she said, and I can't remember if this is on or off the record, so I should be careful, but I remember talking about it with her extensively in interviews anyways, and she said it's going to lead to a lot of lawsuits against institutions, and when you take away the statute of limitations, you're going to get a lot of accusations against the dead of big organizations, dead people that belong to big organizations, and you might get some phony lawsuits there.
I think you're going to definitely get some phony lawsuits. I don't think there's any question there. And again, I'm not that familiar with what the law. Are you saying that it eliminates the statute of limitations? I can't believe
for a brief period of time. I think it's 1 year.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay.
1 year lifts the statute of limitations to a lot of lawsuits. I think it was Empire Report said over 400 child sex lawsuits were filed
just
in one county.
Right.
Just in New York County. So then there's Monroe County, which had over 300 some.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's money to be made here. And the question of the justice of the thing, I think, kind of falls by the wayside as far as I'm concerned in that respect. And there are a number of ways of looking at it, but anytime you do something like this, you just open it up because there's a ton of attorneys out there ready to pick up your claims, and in terms of settlements, they get a big chunk of the settlement. I mean, the old contingency fee approach that attorneys use can be a source of quite a bit of income. So I guess I agree with your interpretation of what Senator Young had to say.
Talking to Dr. Robert Heineman, Harvard University political science professor emeritus. Liberals want to make some changes to the Supreme Court in Washington.
Yes, I noted the other night, I believe it was Tuesday night, they were one of the Fox News commentators was discussing the claims that the Supreme Court had to be brought under control by the liberals because, of course, the Supreme Court right now has, I think, a pretty clear 5-4 conservative majority, and those guys are going to be on there for quite a while. They have lifetime tenure. So, and of course, at least, a couple, Ginsburg and is it Breyer? I'm thinking Breyer are getting up there in age and not particularly healthy. So you could lose a couple liberals there. And I don't wish them ill, don't get me wrong, but it's possible that you could have a couple more vacancies before Trump leaves the White House and before the next election. And that's very scary for the liberals. The problem here is that you got to be careful what you wish for in these situations. Senator Reid, of course, removed the impeachment or the filibuster requirement there for a number of important appointments. And the result has been that, of course, the Republicans have made hay with that, piling appointments into the federal courts left and right. Although Reid is not entirely responsible for that, but nonetheless. So in terms of the size of the Supreme Court, which, of course, Congress has control over, that's not specified in the Constitution. And so Congress can change the size of the court. When it started out, it was 6 members. And under Lincoln, it went up to 10. And then when Andrew Johnson was president, Congress lowered the size of the Supreme Court to 8 because they didn't want Johnson to have any appointments to the court. And then when Grant became president, I think they raised it again to 9. So Grant got an appointment and has stayed at 9 ever since. But, of course, President Roosevelt, back in 1936, tried to pack the Supreme Court by introducing legislation that would have increased the size of the court to 15 and would have given him 6 additional appointments to the court. That effort by Roosevelt failed, but of course that is often called the switch in time that saved 9, because the Supreme Court began upholding Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal legislation, so there was much less reason for increasing the size of the court. And that's been the last real serious attempt, I think, to increase the size of the court. But that certainly Congress has the power to do that. On the other hand, the president has the power to veto an effort like that. But the real question is, why would the liberals want to do that? I mean, if you do something like that and you end up with somebody like a conservative like Trump or someone of that sort, they can go back and pack it with conservatives. So the whole idea of the court, of course, is that it is a brake, and it is an obstacle, it's a limit on all kinds of legislation and policy, something obviously that some of the liberals don't like at all right now. But that's why the system was set up that way. And to remove that and throw it into the hands of a majority, whoever happens to be the current majority, the problem is once that's done, let's say you raise the size of the court to 10 or 11, then the next majority comes in, can raise it to 11 or 12. I mean, once you set the precedent being able to do that, there's nothing to stop changing majorities from changing the size of the court. So that seems to me to be a pretty fundamental change and not a constructive change at all. So just to keep the listeners informed, Congress does have that power. There's no question about it.
Talking to Dr. Robert A. Heineman, going to take a quick break. We will be back. When we get back, we're going to talk about, among other things, the possibility of a recession. Stay with us.
There's nothing like meeting face-to-face, and there's nothing like Zoom to make that happen. Zoom lets you connect and do business across town or around the world. Zoom ties together all of your communication needs into one easy platform for video conferencing, phone calls, group chat, webinars, and your conference rooms. Connect easily from anywhere, your mobile phone, your laptop, or conference room. Zoom is how business gets done. Get your free account at Zoom.com today. Meet happy with Zoom.
Back with Dr. Bob.
Hello.
Here on AM 1480 WLEA. Dr. Heineman, talk of recession, anything to it?
Well, there are some things happening in the world that indicate that there's some fundamental changes economically that are not very positive. And then, of course, there are other changes that are taking place. For example, the price of gold is going out of sight. Well, that's because I guess some people think that the economy, some of these economies are going to fold. The price of copper is way down when copper is a key component for industrial use, which is, would indicate that there isn't much demand there. But what's interesting is that both in Germany, which of course is, I think, the third most prosperous economy in the world, in Germany and Switzerland, the government bond rates, the interest rates on bonds are negative. In other words, the way I read this is, let's say inflation is running at 2 or 3%, and the best you can get for interest rates on your bonds is maybe 1.5% or 2%. You're basically getting negative interest on your bonds, and that is not a healthy economic situation to have. Japan was in that situation, I think, for 8 or 10 years before they, I think, finally pulled out. And tied to this in the United States, the 10-year bond rate now is less than the rate for the 30-day or 90-day Treasury notes. And I guess that's a really bad sign in terms of where the economy is going. So there are some signs there that are beginning to look like a recession of sorts is coming. But I think the key component of all this is our trade war with China, which seems to have unsettled all these things and may in fact be changing economic relationships pretty fast. So one of the problems is we're in a global economic situation, I think, that is unusual, and so it's not certain that all these things mean that somehow we're headed for a major recession. I find the American economy is pumping along at a really fine pace, and so let's hope the rest of the world can catch up with us.
President Trump blames the Fed, it says on CNBC yesterday. President Trump blames the Fed for concerns about a slowing U.S. economy. Trump claims that Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is clueless.
Well, I think that's a little unfair to Mr. Powell. And obviously the Fed has dropped interest rates 0.25%. I think we discussed that earlier. Obviously Trump wants them to drop it even more. I don't know, the federal funds rate is running, a little about 2% or so. It seems to me that's not unreasonable as a stimulus to economic activity. Trump can blame whomever he wants. On the other hand, I don't know, what he's complaining about. The economy, again, is doing reasonably well here in this country, but he may be getting some information that goes along the lines of what we just mentioned. I'm not sure.
Well, Doc, with that, we should take off. I want to thank you so much for stopping by our shy, modest, humble studio.
Well, that's well put, Brian. My pleasure.
Thanks, Doc. See you next week.
All right.